In a previous tutorial, we looked at how to create a risk object. In this tutorial, we're going to have a look at the what if functionality that is inside the risk object report. So I've got several risk objects on the map at the moment, but I'm just concentrated on this one here. And again, as I'm sure you're fully aware, if the risk object icon or symbology is too small, you can increase it by going on to the map toolbar and clicking on to third icon down, and then change the size of the symbol. And I've just increased the size. That's good enough. Okay, so if I go back into this particular report, and you can go into a report either by going to the actual risk object database and by clicking into the database from there, or you can, if you want to see the individual risk object itself, then just place a pointer into the center of the triangle of the risk object you want to see, and then we can double click, and then the report will open up. And for this particular risk object, this is a chemical plant with several different chemical materials associated with it that are of interest to us because they're going to cause potentially a hazard if there is a deliberate or accidental release from this particular facility. And again, we have various release scenarios that we've placed in, and we can have up to 25, and we can click down here to look at each one, or we can use this one here to look at the record, or go back here, or delete a record, or clear a record, or edit a record. So we can use this small tool down here if we've got multiple different what they call records or release scenarios inside the one risk object report. But we've got our 5 here, and we've indicated that this material, nitrogen trioxide, is our default. It may not be, and we'll have a look and we can readjust that. We've also got a hazard range of 500 meters. That's something that we've placed down from advice from maybe scientific advisor or defense advisor, or wherever it may be, whatever our national procedures are, we can place in a hazard range that we don't want any units or unit symbols to be within that particular area. Or we can use the safety exclusion zones of 1, 3 or 10 kilometers that are indicated in the ATP 3.8.1. And again, just to remind you how they look inside CBRN-Analysis, we'll just click onto there, and that then removes the hazard range, and we're now using the ATP 3.8.1 safety exclusion zones. And if we go OK, they are indicated, as you can see, by purple dotted lines going all the way around 1 kilometer, 3 kilometer and 10 kilometers. And if you have units within these exclusion zones, there are certain procedures that they should carry out. But again, you can have a look in the ATP 3.8.1, and just to clarify that information, that's not what we're in this particular tutorial we're interested in looking at. So let's get back physically inside this report, double click into it, and there it is. And then we will take off safety exclusion, and then we'll place on 500 meters. We'll place that back in there. We'll go OK. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this, make it a bit larger, just make it easier. Okay, so there we go. Right, so how do we use the what if function? We may be asked to what if a defense advisor or commander wants to know, okay, at this current moment in time, if there was a release from this facility containing these type of materials, would that affect any of our units that we have within our area of responsibility? Obviously, this is dictated by the weather and where the weather is going to go and what materials are associated with this risk object. So to carry that function out, all you as the operator need to do is double click inside the symbol, and then down at the bottom and left hand side you have two options: the what if, to make a what if prediction so that you can have a look, or you can actually generate a CBRN2 if there is a real incident release from this particular facility. We'll have a look at that in a moment. What we'll do is we'll click on to the what if. So if we click on to what if, what the software will do is now create a new map window, but indicating to us that we are in a what if function. So that is shown to us by this information up here saying we are in a what if window, and we're going to do some predictions that relate just to this risk object. And we also have a calculation button and a units at risk button on the right hand side, and we can have the ability to pin these open if we want, or allow them to just open and close as we place on them. Okay, you can see I've actually changed that round, and I'm quite happy with that. So you can change them round. I'm going to dim the map back for this particular example just to make it slightly easier to see, and then we're going to move it over here. So like I've already indicated, this is a second map that's been opened up. Okay, here is our original map, and here is our what if map. So all we have to do now is go to calculation, and when we open up calculation you can see that we have two choices as far as weather is concerned. We are using the CDR weather reports that are inside the system, or we can place in manual weather. So if we have localized weather within the facility itself and we want to place that in, then we can do that. Or maybe we don't have any weather available for that particular area of where the facility is and we want to manually place some in, then we have the ability to do that. But it normally defaults to the CDR messages that we have available inside the system. Then what we can do is select whichever release scenario we want to look at. At the moment we've got this one as our default, but do remember we do have others that are in there. So we've got 5 different toxic industrial chemicals that we think are of concern to us that are situated at this facility. We'll take the first one, we'll ask it to calculate, and then that's the type of template release we're going to have at this moment in time using this weather if there was something to happen. Okay, so as far as we can see that's not going to affect. If we want to know what the potential hazard distance is going to be, we can click on there and we can see it's 150 meters by 3 kilometers or 3,000 meters. Okay, and we can do the same with any of the others. So we can go ammonia, ask it to calculate, very small, boron, ask it to calculate. Okay, in this case then it will affect 3 units if we have a release at this moment in time. Okay, from the facility, whether, like I said, that's accidental or deliberate. Okay, and we can do exactly the same for the rest, but we're not going to bother. You understand the principles of how it works. Like I said, you just select whichever one you want. If you want to hold on to that information, because obviously when you close down the what if window all that's going to disappear, then what you can do is, if we'll stay with boron, and then what we can do is we can create a briefing. So that will create a briefing report of this particular material and what is going to happen with the current weather conditions at the moment. So we click onto briefing. So I'm doing this in free time. You can see it's you probably can't see it's coming up in the background, so what I'm going to have to do is reduce down so that you can physically see, and I'll get rid of that, and I've just done that just now. So there is the object briefing for boron. There is a picture that's been taken. That's a report that's been made. Those are the units that would be affected if there was a release. We don't have a checklist. We've talked about that again when we talked about creating, so there's no checklist there. And we got the emergency response guide, okay, which again may not have some information that's associated with it. Okay, so let's close that down. Don't need to save it, but you could print that off, or you could save it, and for each one of these materials, if you wanted to do that and have a briefing for each one of them. Or again, you can take all of them and culminate it and bring it together into one report if you wanted to do so. That's entirely up to you. So that is how the what if function works inside the risk object reports. Once you're finished with that, then all you need to do is just close down, and then you're back onto the normal map. And finally, just to show you what happens if you have a real release from the facility, then again you double click onto the risk object, open up the report. This time you generate the CBRN-2 report, so you click onto that icon. The software will then ask you, okay, which one of the release scenarios has been released, and you can say it's this one, go OK, and then the software will generate a CBRN-2 with all that information that you already placed into the risk object, and then indicate that that did come from a risk object, and then you can just carry on with your normal procedures. Obviously you may come across a release that you haven't already got in as part of the risk object, and therefore it may be just easier to create the CBRN-2 as it is here, and then you may have to adjust depending on what the new information is if you don't have it already in the risk object as a release scenario. So just be aware of that. So there you go. That's what if, and also a little bit at the end there of how to generate and make a CBRN-2 from a risk object. So I'll just close this down, and that's all on this tutorial.